Hello everyone, my name is Natalie and welcome to or back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing another book haul. I did one February, maybe March, I'm not sure, but I've got a lot more books since then, and so, well, let's get into them, shall we? The first book I have is kind of like a comic book, I think you'd class it as. It's got wonderful art style, and that is Moonstruck by Grace Ellis, Shay Beagle, Kate Leff, Caitlin Quirk, Clayton Cowles and Lauren McCubin. This follows the life of a bunch of monsters. So we have a werewolf, I think we've got a troll. So it's full of monsters, and monsters live alongside humans, and this is about their hometown. I think this one follows on the barista, which is Julie, I think her name is, and it follows her and her new girlfriend. So we've got some LGBTQIA plus representation in here as well, and I picked this up because it just seemed like a fun read. The cover really drew me in, and I love fantasy stuff, and fantasy stuff that comes in like a comic book style is always a win for me. The art style, I'll show you, is very like bright and colourful, and yeah, it's just a gorgeous book and I can't wait to get into it. Sticking to like mythical like monsters and stuff, the next we have is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. This is kind of like, I feel like it's D&D inspired. So our main character is an orc barbarian and it follows her, and I think the best way to describe it will be to read the back of it. So it says, worn out after decades of packing steel and raising hell, Viv, the orc barbarian, crashes out of a warrior's life with one final score. A forgotten legend, a fabled artifact, and an unreasonable amount of hope led her to the streets of Foon, where she plans to open the first coffee shop the city has ever seen. However, the dreams of a fresh start pulling shots instead of swinging swords are hardly a sure bet. Old frenemies and Thorn's shady underbelly may just upset her plans. To finally build something that will last, Viv will need some new partners and a different kind of resolve. And at the bottom it's described as a hot cup of fantasy, slice of life with a dollop of romance froth. And I think this sounds wonderful. I love like coffee shop books and coffee shop romances, so I think this will be wonderful, as well as it being D&D inspired. I mean, what's not to love? Next up we have two books that have been a long time in coming. I have owned the first and last books in this series for about 5 years now, and I've never picked up the middle ones. I don't know why exactly. I think I was just putting it off. I'm not sure if I've got these in the right order, but these are the Dream Thieves and Blue Lily Blue by Stephanie Stiefvater. And yeah, what to say, I've had the Raven Boys for such a long time, I've never picked it up. And now I finally completed the collection, so now I feel like I kind of have to read it, although I've done that with other series before and I still haven't got around to reading them. So we'll see if I can get motivated to read these. Please encourage me, tell me to read them. The Raven Boys follows a character called Blue, and I think she's from a family of psychics. She hasn't yet got her psychic ability, but she has been told by one of the other like psychics in her family that the first boy she loves, or the first boy she kisses, is destined to die. I think that's right. And then she bumps into a Raven Boys who is like ragtag group of guys who are doing something they shouldn't be, and she joins them for the journey. I think that's what it's about. Correct me if I'm wrong. Up next we have a book that I've heard a lot about and I desperately wanted to read it, but I kept putting it off and thinking, oh no, I don't need to read it this time, I've got too many books. And finally, when I was buying a bunch of books, I was like, you know, sod it, I may as well pick this one up as well because I've been wanting to read it for such a long time. And that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by Tay J. Clune. This is about this guy who works for some kind of office who has to check up on this group of orphans in the house. And the reason why these orphans are in this house is because they all have supernatural abilities or have all been classed as having dangerous abilities. So they've been secluded here away from society. And I think it's about him maybe finding out they may not be as dangerous as they seem. We have another book that I've been wanting to read for years and have finally picked it up, and that is Pet by Kweke Emezi. This book is actually thinner than I thought it was. For some reason I thought it was a lot thicker than it actually is. And this follows a young girl who has a monster underneath her bed, and she is really confused by it because apparently all the monsters have been eradicated. Like, there's no monsters left. There used to be monsters, but now there are none. And apparently she finds one under her bed, and I think it's about her coming to realise that maybe the monsters under her bed aren't real monsters after all. Something along those lines. It sounded amazing. Whenever I've heard it, I've always remembered I wanted to read it, and I liked everything that I've heard about it, so hopefully I can pick it up soon. Okay, so next up we have a historical fiction novel, and that is called Cecily, I'm not sure how you pronounce this name, by Annie Garthwaite. And for this, it's easier to read the back. It's historical fiction, but this is set in 1431. England has been fighting France for 100 years. At home, power-hungry men within a corrupt government manipulate a weak king and name Sicily's husband, York's loyal duke, as enemy. As the king's grasp on sanity weakens, plots to destroy York take root. It will take all of Sicily's courage and cunning to save her family. But when the will to survive becomes ambition for the crown, will she risk treason to secure it? This is war as women fight it. This sounds very empowering. It sounds just like history told from a woman's perspective of what happened. So I'm really looking forward to this. Obviously, bear in mind, this is about an actual event that happened in history, but it is a fictionalized version told from a woman's perspective, but that's everything I like, so I can't wait. Next up, we have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have not read this book. I've read Daisy Jones and the Six. I actually read it within 2 sittings, so I loved that book. And I have heard a lot of good things about this one, so I'm hoping to love this as well, because I think this one was the first one that kind of pointed people in the direction of Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is the first of her books I remember everyone reading all over BookTube and Instagram and, you know, everywhere. Goodreads. This book was everywhere. I haven't read it. I've read Daisy Jones and the Six and I loved that, so I'm hoping to fall in love with this one, as so many other people have. The plot of this one is we have this aging starlet called Evelyn Hugo, and I think she's in her 70s or 80s and she's ready to tell her life story. She's been a very private person, but she's also had a very, very dramatic life, and she invites this reporter to come and tell her story. Everyone's very confused by this because this reporter is a nobody. She's just started out, and nobody, not even her, is sure why this massive starlet is asking her to do the biggest story ever, essentially. So I can't wait for this. We'll see how I like it. Next up, we have The Woman in the Middle by Millie Johnston. This one, I don't really remember what it's about, so I think the best thing for me and for you will be just for me to read the back. Shay Bastable is the woman in the middle. She is part of the sandwich generation, caring for her parents and her children, supporting her husband Bruce, holding them all together as best she can. But then when piece by piece everything Shay thought of as certain in her life is taken away and disaster strikes, she has to put herself first for a change. In order to move forward with her present, Shay needs to make sense of her past, and in doing so she discovers that you have to hit rock bottom before you can safely say the only way is up. Okay, I remember this now. I was really excited to read it because this sounds a lot like my family. This also sounds a lot like my mum. I showed it to her and she wants to read this as well. So I can't wait for this one. And I think it's going to be really interesting to read from the perspective of someone who, you know, is, like they said, the in-between, the person who is taking care of the parents and the kids and whose kids are maybe slowly growing up and the parents are getting older and weaker. So I'm really interested to read from this perspective. Okay everyone, I have 3 books left. These next 3 books are more of a spiritualist, like nature and spirituality, so if you want to end it there and see those, then that's fine. I will see you all later in my next video. If you want to stick around for these final 3, then let's get into them. The next up, actually the next one isn't really about spirituality. It's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. This is kind of like a self-help book. I have been hearing so many people talk about this. A lot of people have actually been telling me to read this book, so I picked it up just because I think about like 5-6 people have told me to read this book, like independently at separate times. Over the last like 2 or so years have been telling me to pick up this book, so I figured maybe it was time to buy it and to see what I think. Again, this is like non-fiction, it's like a self-help book, so when I do pick it up, it's one I'll be reading slowly. The next book we have is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I think that's how you pronounce the last name. And this is essentially about breaking any bad habits you've gotten into, any thought patterns that aren't really serving you anymore. And it's also about kind of like breaking any trauma you may have, cutting ties with maybe that's why you've got into these habits. Again, this is a non-fiction. Again, I'll be reading through it slowly to see, but again, this is one I was recommended, so I'm curious to see how I find this one. This last one is heavy. I think I'll be reading this one for friggin' years. I bought this because this is something both me and my aunt are really interested in, and my aunt's not a reader, so she basically said, okay, you read this and just impart any information I need to know to me, so I'm going to be the filter. And that is the complete book of Chakras by Cindy Dale. As you can see, it is so heavy. It's got diagrams. The font is tiny, which is why I've said I'm going to be reading this for years. This is over 1,000 pages long. It's floppy though, so it kind of, I can forgive it for being long because it's floppy, so I feel like it will be easier to read than if it was a stiff hardback. So yeah, this is just a complete book of chakras. It goes through what each of them do, how they can help you. Again, this isn't something that's for everybody. A lot of people don't believe in it. Personally, it's something like I am looking into and I believe in, so. Okay everyone, if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I'm so out of breath from holding that book. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if this seems like content you enjoy. I don't know when I'm posting this video, but I am either going for or will currently be in open heart surgery when this goes out, or like about to go for open heart surgery when this comes out, which hence why all the books, because I'm going to be off work for about 3 or so months depending on my healing, so I'm going to have a lot of time to read. I'm also going to have a lot of time to like walk and like take a break, which is like so wrong to say you're taking a break to take open heart surgery, but it's going to be nice apart from healing. So that's why I have so many books. Not that you have a reason, but I have a reason. I'm going to need stuff to entertain me and to keep my brain working. Anyway, I hope you have a lovely day, evening, wherever you are, and I'll see you later. Bye!